Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Hi, I'm Luis Loza. I'm a developer on the Pathfinder Omens line over at Paizo.
If you haven't checked out Mwangi Expanse, viewers, please check this out. It's excellent. I enjoyed this book immensely. Um, I know there was a first edition version previously
Yes.
for Pathfinder. What can you tell us? So when you were given this assignment to help develop this book, how much did the first edition book have a how much did that influence what you had to do?
So what we did, we looked at the first edition book for a lot of the locations, a lot of the general ideas. So we have cities that existed in the first edition book, like Nantambu, like Blood Cove, a lot of different locations, regions, a lot of ideas that we took and we thought these are great ideas. We want to both change the lens through that they're being seen through. So rather than having them be viewed from an outsider's perspective and say, "Oh, I heard Blood Cove is such and such place," we can write it in such a way that we talk about a place like Blood Cove and Tambu and talk about its people, the people who live there, and the experiences that are in there, rather than what people outside of those regions are hearing. So that is kind of the philosophy that we had for the entire book, which is, rather than writing it as if we were outsiders, kind of looking in, we are there already. We are telling it from the perspective of the people that live there, and really showing that it's a place that it's lived in, that it has its own history and all that stuff. So we got to grab a lot of the existing stuff and then kind of just switch the lens on that. And then also, we got to take a lot of those ideas that were kind of not necessarily bare bones, but just um, relatively, they had just kind of the fundamentals there. You had the basics about what a location was or an NPC, and because we had 312 pages to work with, we got to tell our authors kind of, take your time, explain a lot of the details, tell us about the everyday life, tell us about food, tell us about fashion, things like that for different locations, or tell us about backstories of these places or people that we haven't had a chance to explore. So we got a chance to kind of let our authors run wild and really have fun with expanding and having a chance to flesh out a lot of these places.
Speaking of writers, I've noticed that you have a really diverse team this
Yeah.
time around for this book. What can you tell us about the team and who you have exactly in this group?
Yeah, well, we're always looking to include more voices into our books. So if you look through, the start of second edition, all the last Lost Omens books, we're always trying to add more authors, people with different backgrounds, experiences. It just so happened to be that this is probably our kind of biggest pulling in the net of authors that we had. It was uh, a really interesting experience because a lot of the authors that we got weren't initially ones that we first reached out to. There were several authors that we contacted, and along the way, what would happen is we'd ask those authors that were already working with us or about to work with us, "Do you know anyone else?" Because they are part of these communities. They know the the these spheres and these circles that we may not necessarily be tapped into. So we kind of sneakily used our authors as a recruitment for other authors that would have been a good fit, and it worked out really well. There's lots of authors that I think just really knocked it out of the park that we didn't have on our radar initially, but thanks to the help of both kind of this recruitment that we did, asking for authors among our current author pool, and just over the years kind of developing relationships and learning about new authors and new voices out there with the help of like the RPG industry just getting bigger and bigger every day. It led to a really amazing group of people working on this.
There's a lot of venture seeds. There's a lot of things one can do in
Yeah.
this world, in this part of the world. Um, what if I know it's always hard to choose between your children. What would you say is some of your favorite either settings or adventures or characters in this book?
I am particularly fond of Vidrian, which is a nation that most recently, like in the setting 5 years ago, within the setting, kind of broke free of this kind of oppressive government, this oppressive this oppression that was kind of hanging over it. There was a lot of people that were, you know, being held down and stuff, and eventually they rose up, and now they're free, and that's great. I think we've seen a lot of those stories where, you know, people rise up to kind of break free of the shackles that bind them, but I don't think we always get to see the story of, okay, then what? There's a lot of romanticism about like the aha, we're free, liberation, all this stuff, but there's also a lot of hard work that comes with that. And Vidrian is now a few years into this freedom, into this kind of fledgling nation that they have, and figuring things out. It's not all just like, oh well, you know, we're all happy through the power of friendship and liberation, you know, it all sorts itself out. No, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and kind of, you know, the struggles that come with that is a really interesting thing to see in narratives in general. And I think in particular RPGs haven't really touched on that too much. There's been a lot of rebellion stories, I think, but nothing about the cleanup and all the hard work that comes with it afterwards.
Uh, I'm very impressed with the ancestries options that
Yeah.
you have in this book. I mean, there are three different types of elves, three different
Hmm.
types of black elves, which
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that anywhere in any RPG system. I mean, you have dwarves with hair that are just kind of like this gradient colors coming in and out
Yeah.
of their beards and hair. Uh, all these options are incredible. Can you tell us about the creation process behind it?
So a lot of these had been iterated upon multiple times over the years in Pathfinder's history. So I think if you wanted to, you could trace back some of these ethnicities, some of these groups, to early in the Pathfinder first edition days, and it's always just kind of been building upon itself into interesting ideas. We just never really had the chance to give them a full set of time in the spotlight. We would occasionally have Akuje elves show up here and there. We would have, you know, mentions of the Taralu doors and things like that. But at most they'd be like a paragraph or two. So a lot of the time what ends up happening is we just say, oh, here they are, and here's the basics about who they are over and over again. We'd have to explain it for the context based in wherever they showed up in a book. But now that we're getting a chance to fully look at them, we get to really expand on them, really give them a deep dive. And a lot of it just came from the great imaginations of our authors, right? We had a lot of basic framework for some of these, and we told them to expand on it, and it turned out great. The some of them, like the Songo halflings, I think had at most 3 paragraphs or so worth of unique content to explain who they were over the years. So it was really pretty much a blank slate for our author to work on it, and she did tremendous with it. And it's just a really interesting thing when both you have to give it a different lens to look from, you know, rather than your typical medieval European inspired fantasy. We said look into, you know, African cultures, look into anywhere else, right? And pull on that and see what you can make into something interesting for these, because we need them to be, we don't need them to be, you know, 100% distinct from the rest of the elves and halflings and dwarves, right? They're still dwarves. You should still be able to recognize that they're dwarves, and they're still elves and so on. But we want them to be a different take. We want them to be unique and interesting. So, you know, when the time comes to play an elf, you are kind of stuck at a crossroads where you're like, well, I really like these elves and these elves and these elves and all these elves, you know, giving you too many options, giving you too many great choices, and you know, for different reasons, and that can tell different stories. And I think the, you know, putting in that lens, and then also just wanting to showcase a different look, you know, something that we had never seen before, was really important to us. So that was another big factor for how these groups came to be. So you mentioned three sets of black elves. You know, we want to show black elves, and we don't want to just be like, oh, but those are the black elves, right? No, it's like, no, we want to have lots of distinct groups that happen to also be, you know, they're the black elves, but so are these. And it's like, well, if I say black elves, now you don't know which ones I'm talking about, which is good because it means we have a lot of cultures to pull from and stuff like that.
I've seen a couple other setting books that are not there are non-European type of mythology books, but it just doesn't feel real, doesn't feel fleshed out,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that. Like yeah, like you said, there's when anyone says which when you talk about black elves, you have to think about which one, and each one has their distinct culture and philosophy, and uh, I, I I I don't know if this is actually really a question, but I really appreciate how well fleshed out these ancestries are.
And I think that comes with the fact that we could give them as much space as we could in this book. The fact that we dedicated this book entirely to just the Mwangi Expanse meant that we got to give them the page count and the word count to do that. And I think it's not necessarily like a flaw of other setting books that, I mean, we've done other setting books where we kind of touch on all these different groups, all these different cultures, but it's, I think you really need to give them room to breathe, to kind of explore those kind of things, to really flesh them out and make them, you know, feel lived in, feel real, to just like any other cultures and groups in other settings.
Speaking of exploration,
Yeah.
there again, there's tons of great settings, each one very distinct and unique. Is there anything you would advise game masters about maybe where to start? Is there if you were helping to run a game, what would you introduce?
Oh boy, the Mwangi Expanse is probably too enormous for like anything. That's the fun thing and also the difficult thing, right? Like, I think if you just had the book, you would be set for a setting for the rest of your days if you just wanted to just use this book, which is great. But I think the easiest thing to do would maybe to kind of base things out like you do with pretty much any RPG adventuring group, any RPG stories. Kind of find like a base of operations. That could be a city, yeah, that we've detailed here. It could be like a small settlement, you know, hidden among the jungles and stuff. But find kind of like a hub to work from and build out from there. We give you a lot of details, but even with 300 pages, we can't fill out the entirety of the location. Then so the region is kind of free for you to do as you wish. We kind of gave you the we gave you the colors to play with, and then you can use those however you want, right? But I think that might be the easiest thing. Find a settlement or kind of a hub that everyone can come back to, or things can be kind of focused on, even if that might be like there's this dungeon, you know, ancient ruins, and that's where everything's going to take place in. As long as you kind of have a localized or a centralized location, that will help out a lot. Or you can look at some of our pre-written adventures that are based out of the Mwangi Expanse. We have one module, the Slithering, that came out last year, and then we have the upcoming Adventure Path that I think will be really useful for GMs who don't have the time to prep everything entirely, and they can just kind of grab that off the shelf and have a pre-written story. Or if you want, you can just kind of pluck encounters and locations from out of those as well.
When it comes to ancestries, is there any favorites that you were glad that were a part of this book?
I really like the look of Anadi, the spider people there, because peacock spiders are very colorful, and I personally have nothing against spiders, so I think they're kind of cute. But I'm really a fan of Konrasu, which are the kind of shards of planar. Uh, they're so hard to describe. They're like a shard of planar energy, kind of given sentience, and then they build a wooden body around themselves so they can explore the world and interface with the world. And it's really weird. I don't think any RPG has ever done anything like that, right? It's very easy to say, oh, here's an animal, and then I made that playable. And that happens a lot. You know, we have cat folk and rabbit folk and dragons and all this stuff, but something that's like a shard of sentient planar energy, nothing like that has ever come up before. And I really like mechanically how they work. There's a lot of cool stuff they can do. They're very good at kind of being tanky frontliner style characters, so they're great as champions or fighters and stuff like that. So they have a lot of cool stuff going for them in the mechanics department that I think makes them kind of my favorite out of the 6 ancestries available.
Hmm. There are not a lot of again as we're talking about this non-European mythology based books out there.
Mhm.
So someone may be thinking, oh, this is great. I want to maybe use this for a different game system,
Mhm.
maybe D&D or something similar like that. Would you say this book is it's something that it's easily anyone can really easily use for other systems and games.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think part of the thing that we went in with this book knowing that we're not going to have too many mechanics and rules options that are reliant on Pathfinder Second Edition. We obviously want to give those. We have the different ancestries we put in, and have some feats and monsters and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'd call 70 to 80% of the book is just lore and flavor and setting information, because we want you to play with the Mwangi Expanse however works best for your group. I've seen people on Twitter talking about this book that it inspired them to run certain types of campaigns in their in some other RPG that they're playing. That's exactly what we want. We want you to go have fun with the Mwangi Expanse in whatever game system you want. If you happen to play Pathfinder Second Edition, obviously this book is perfect for that. But there's enough material here that you can use in anything, and it's a setting book first and a rule book second. Probably rule book third or fourth actually on that priority list. So it works great for any game that you're playing, or just pluck out a city if you don't want to use the entire setting, right? Pluck out a city, pluck out a monster, and convert it or whatever. Just grab what you think is best from that, and use it in whatever you want. We really set out to hopefully get this, what we feel is kind of an underrepresented type of fantasy, out into the world, and then hopefully inspire more people to do that. And eventually, I would love to get to the point where there is an African inspired cultural analog kind of setting book as big and as comprehensive as this for every game system out there, to the point where maybe people are even rolling their eyes. It's like, okay, let's go to something else, because we've done this kind of stuff so much. But we think it's an important step towards making that a type of fantasy more people are aware of and more people want to enjoy and play with in the future.
What is coming up next for after this book now when it comes to the Mwangi Expanse? I heard rumors of an adventure path. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yes, absolutely. There's an adventure path that is starting to release next month. I think officially it comes out August 4th. So next week it should be available, or the next week or two. That is an adventure path called Strength of Thousands, and it's based out of the Magambia Academy, which is a big magical school located in the city of Nantambu. And it's not a magic school like you go in when you're a kid and you go there and all the way till you're an adult. It's more like a magical university. You're kind of college age person and go there and have your major that focuses on a specific type of magic. You join with one of the 5 branches of the school that are you more into storytelling and that type of magic? Are you more of a defensive person guarding other people, stuff like that? And you will play as new students in the academy and kind of play out several years of you going to school and taking classes and doing all this stuff, while at the same time kind of getting wrapped up into the kind of adventures you're used to with RPGs, where there are threats to face and evils to stop. And the idea behind the name Strength of Thousands is this academy has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and there have been thousands of other students that came before you, and you're always building off the knowledge that the thousands of students that came before you kind of established. So you're working off their knowledge and all this stuff, and I think it'll be a really cool look into the Mwangi Expanse. It does kind of go all over the place as you go around and study different things and locations and stuff. I got to write the 4th adventure in that adventure path, which is called I can't remember at the moment, but I wrote the 4th adventure, which by that point you're kind of already part of the faculty. You're teachers yourselves, but you're still going out and learning more stuff and doing a lot of work to try to do good within the Mwangi Expanse and help people out. The Magambia Academy is all about community and charity and helping people out, not just learning for the sake of learning, but using that to help others. So I think it'll have a really cool message to kind of encourage people, like, hey, just because you have this great power doesn't mean you just go around and collect treasure and slay dragons. No, you can do good with it. And the adventure itself, all the adventures themselves kind of work towards including that into everything. So it's not just about breaking down the door and slaying the next monster that's in the next room.
Oh, that sounds incredible. Um, so, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to share about this book before we wrap up?
Oh boy, the monsters are great. They all, a lot of them are inspired, like we said, from different African folklores and tales and stuff. Uh, I'm particularly fond of, there is a snake here. Let me just open my book real quick, tell you the name because I can't remember off the top of my head. But this snake, the Zinba, uh, a lot of monsters, they're there for you to defeat and stuff. But the Zimba is a good monster. It's a creature that big snake, it's got healing properties, which is not a thing you really associate with snakes most of the time. So if you happen to encounter one of its layers, Zimba's lair, they live among water and stuff. So the water that it resides in gains some of these healing properties. So if you need help, you can maybe find a Zimba's lair, drink some of the water, and it'll heal you. Or if you're able to befriend a Zimba, it can choose to bite you in such a way that it heals and restores you. So and I think that makes for a very interesting encounter that isn't just another fight. This monster, the Zimba, can effectively be an NPC. You want to, if someone needs help, you maybe need to go track down a Zimba to win win its favor and say, "Hey, come help us with this," which is a different type of encounter entirely than you would have normally when you just, "Hey, going in the jungle and something attacks me, and okay, I gotta go fight that." And it's I think it kind of leads into that philosophy of just like how different things can be with what we're doing at Strength of Thousands, and kind of hopefully what we encourage with the different types of adventures and the cultures and setting that we've put forth in the Mwangi Expanse.
Excellent. So, thank you so much for taking the time to
Yeah,
talk to us about the
no
book.
problem.
And to our viewers out there, I hope you enjoyed this segment. Stay safe out there, get your shots, and have a great day. Take care, everyone.